Okay, so let's talk about the rest of this tune. As a review, we have the first section, 4 measures long. We go into the second section. Also 4 measures long. Then we come back to the first section again. And we do another 4 measures of that. Now we would approach the first section when it comes around again the same way that we would have approached it the first time. The approach we're taking is that we're doing what we call just making the changes. So the thing I want to drive home is that in order to improvise effectively, you have to know the song to the extent that you know when the chords are changing and you know what those chords are. That if you were to listen to that, go back and listen to that video where this all started with Billy Strings, that you would be able to basically predict where the chords are going to change. You just know the chords are going to change here, the chords are going to change there, and you know what those chords are. It takes that type of familiarity with a song in order to improvise over it effectively. So I'm going to play through the entire song a couple of times just to give you something to play along with. 1, 2, 3, 4. Back to part 1. Part 3. And it turns around, goes back to part 1. Part 2. Back to part 1. Part 3. And it turns around and goes back again. Now, just as a reminder, when we first started discussing this song, we saw that Billy Strings was going up to this G chord instead of going back to the E minor, which is perfectly acceptable. The G chord and the E minor chord are closely enough related that whatever you can play for a G chord, you can normally play for an E minor chord. The key of G and the key of E minor are the exact same keys in the sense that they both have F as the one accidental. F is sharp. So when you play a G scale, if you were to start that G scale on the E note instead, you would end up with an E minor scale. So the two those two keys are considered relative to each other because they are essentially the exact same key, the exact same scale, just with a different starting point in the case of the scale. So when we're playing Summertime, we can, when the song actually starts where you're playing Summertime, you can play E minor, or you can play, that takes the place of the E minor, takes the place of the E minor, then goes to part 2. Okay? So what we're talking about is knowing the concept we're trying to get across is knowing what the chords are and where the chords change, and we're using the idea of just using these chord tones as improvisational devices just so you can convince yourself that you know where the chords are changing. Once you know and have that confidence that you do know where the chords are changing and what the chords are, then you can expand on your improvisation. But all the fancy guitar licks and all that sort of thing in the world are basically useless when you're improvising if you do not know what you are improvising over, that being the chord changes. Look at the chord changes as the foundation of the house. You have to build the walls on that foundation or it doesn't work. You have to know the parameters of that foundation. You have to know the conditions as you go around that foundation in order to effectively build the walls, which in this case is the improvisational part where you're just playing the notes, right? Okay? So for the first part of the song, once again, just to review, we talked about using for the E minor and that for the B. Then we got to the second part of the song where it goes to A minor. We have that to the C and to the B. And then it goes back once again to part A, or the first part of the song, part 1, and we would once again be using going back and forth between those two chords, the E minor and the B. Then we finally come to the third part of the song, and now we'll talk about how to improvise over that, and it's really just going to be the same thing. Because, as I said, all we're trying to do is convince ourselves that we know what the chords are and where they are. So the last section, G, E minor, A minor, C. So we've seen the A minor before, haven't we? And we've seen the C chord before. We've seen the E minor chord before. We haven't really talked about the G except to say that for the most part, what you can play for an E minor, you can play for a G. But what we'll do is we'll just make the G, when we get to that part of the song, just a pure G, okay? And in doing that, we'll be able to really appreciate the similarities. So when we played the E minor, the notes that we were using to improvise were based off this small little triad. Okay? And we'll use that once again for the E minor in part 3. But we do have that G chord. Now all we have to do to make this a pure G chord is change one of the notes. We could actually use this, as I said, because the similarities between E minor and G are such that you can basically interchange melodic lines over those two chords. But just to drive home the point of knowing that it is in fact a G chord this time, we'll use a G chord. So here we have these 3 notes, which hopefully you're familiar with, for the E minor. Now for the G, we just have to make one adjustment. This E note that is here on the 5th fret of the B string will just go to a D note on the 3rd fret of the B string. So instead of having these 3 notes, we'll have these 3 notes. So what I'm doing is I'm doing a little half bar on the 3rd fret of the G and the B string, and then I'm putting the 2nd finger here. So you want to, once again, we've talked about that leverage idea when you're getting the half bars or even the full bars. You want to push the hand forward. It seems counterintuitive. It seems like you want to pull back. That's wrong. You actually want to roll the hand forward, and that creates that leverage onto the neck of the guitar. So the chords go G, E minor, A minor, C. And I'm sure somewhere you have these chords written down from when we first started talking about Summertime. So in the process of doing this, if you need to have that out to refer to, that's fine, but it would be better if you actually had those chords memorized. But how you want to approach that is up to you. But in going from the G to the E minor, it's very simple. All we have to do is drop that first finger down and create that E minor, which is the first little triad that we ever used in talking about improvisation here. And then the 3rd chord is the A minor, and then the C, and then back to E minor, and then back to B for the turnaround. Okay? So, the G chord and the E minor chord we know have 2 notes in common. They have this B note on the 4th fret of the G string and this G note on the 3rd fret of the E string. So as those chords are going by, if we wanted to, we could just play those 2 notes. Right, like that. Because those 2 chords have these 2 notes in common. Or we could start here and just play that one note. If we wanted to play all 3 of the notes, we could do something like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4. I went from the G to the E minor. Because in that final section, the G, E minor, A minor, and C only get 2 beats each, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So if I wanted to play those 3 chords in these little chord forms that we're using as our improvisation device, I could go 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. What was that I played at the end? For the E minor chord, I just played this E note, which is in that E minor chord, and then I just switched to this D sharp note, which is in the B chord. And I gave them 4 beats each. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then the song would start again. So, what I'm going to do this time now is I'm actually going to play an improvisation based on what we talked about. I am hoping that you can play the chords well enough. We're not going to have any introduction. We're just going to start right in on the song where we got that 4 measures, E minor, B, E minor, B. And you can play E minor to B7, E minor to B7, or you can use what Billy Strings was using, going up to that G. Because we know why, we can use the G. So I'm going to count to 4. I'm going to play a little improvised lead based on what we've talked about. And I want you to play the chords along with me. Okay? One time through. Let's see if you can do that. If you need to get that chord sheet out because you don't have them memorized yet, feel free. but I do hope you have them memorized because that's the better way to do this. Okay, I'm going to count to 4 and I'm just going to start playing a lead based on all the things we've talked about. I'm going to play a very simple lead because I want to stress the point that you don't have to use all the notes in those little chords. You can use as few or as many as you want. I'm going to choose to use as few as I want. Okay, here we go. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Going to part 2. To the B chord. Back to part 1. Part 3. Back to the E minor there, and then the B to turn it around. Okay, so what I chose to do there, just to kind of break it down for you a little bit, is I just played one note from the E minor for 2 beats, one note from the B chord for 2 beats, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Since the E minor and the B7 chord have that note in common, I just let that ring for the final 4 beats. And then it went to the A minor. I played, as I recall, the C note for 2 beats, the E note for 2 beats, then where the chord switched to C, I came up and played this note, and I believe I just held it for 4 beats. I'm not sure if I have that completely memorized what I play. I'm just guessing at what I played there. Okay, so that basically takes you through the whole song, one time through. And give me some feedback on that. Are you making any kind of headway with this at all? Is it making any sense? Are you able to do it to a large degree, to a small degree? Someday, if you can figure out how to do it, I would really, really like you to make a video for me of you playing. You know, maybe record a video of the chords like I did that one time, and then play back that video of you playing the chords while you play a lead. Or if you just want to show me what kind of lead you can play, I'm sure there are enough recordings of me just playing the chords where you could play that on one device and record your lead on another device. If you could possibly do that, that would be great. Okay, so what I'm going to do to end this video is I'm just going to play the song all the way through, just the rhythm, a couple of more times just to give you something to practice along with. 1, 2, 3, 4. This is part 1. Part 2. Back to part 1. Part Okay, give me some feedback on that. Let me know how it's going. If you're interested in continuing to do something like this and gain more clarification and ideas on how to improvise, or if it's something that really hasn't been that gratifying for you and you just want to move on to some new arrangements or something along that line. Feedback is always welcomed. Have a good one.